Good evening and what's up, everybody? It's Hex Grassroots number 15 with our special guest Hex Orca today. My name is Hex Misha on Twitter. And as always, my co-host Meister Hex is with me. How are you?
Hey Hex Misha. Hey guys, what's up? Meister Hex here. Thank you for tuning in. It's a pleasure again to be live on a Tuesday evening, at least here in Europe, with another special guest, Hex Orca, as you mentioned, Misha. Looking forward for a nice 1 hour.
Yeah, he became quite famous in the community, or one of our bigger grassroots. I mean, the grassroots movement is strong in general, but he became quite a profile recently. So will be interesting to talk to him and hear his stories, hear his ideas. Did you see his upcoming, so to speak?
Actually, no. I mean, the Hex community is growing and growing. So, to be honest, I also just met Hex Orca virtually during his Twitter space. Of course, we will cover that within the next hour. We will also talk about the latest news. We will cover the recent YouTube rug pull, the Richard Hart live stream that went offline for a while. Also, the recent news regarding the Hex community sponsoring a Daytona car or team. This is super interesting, and of course, covering other topics like what Hex Orca is up to with his Hex University. So let's bring him on, I would say.
Let's bring him on. Hex Orca. Welcome, brother. Good evening.
Hey.
How are you?
Doing all right, y'all. Thanks for having me on the show. Really excited to hang out with you too.
Awesome. Thank you very much for taking the time, Hex Orca.
Of course, I'm happy to get into this. You know, I've seen a couple of these grassroots shows, and y'all have some of my favorite content. So I'm excited to share the space with you today.
Oh wow, thank you. That's nice to hear. You know, we just do it casually on the side, not a full-time job, not too serious, just from grassroots for grassroots. So we appreciate the feedback because you know, we're young, we didn't get a lot yet. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think and we'll get into it, but I think the grassroots is really the core of where my interests come from as well. So I really appreciate that you guys kind of start from the ground up and build out that way.
Thank you very much.
It also has this decentralized feature, right? Like no center organized, just the community itself, the grassroots. That's also the spirit of it. And it's also thanks to people to you that come on the stream, are brave enough to talk live. So we all gain from that, so to speak.
Well, y'all are very friendly, so it's easy to come onto a show like this. So thanks for having me.
Nice, man.
We already have some activity. Lost Legacy says, hello, world and fellow Hexicans. Bitfinners, as usual. Thank you very much for tuning in. Hex Orca is a celebrity. I can't imagine you're super busy currently, right?
There's a couple of DMs rolling in lately.
Cool. Yeah, we will cover that as well, what you will be up to in the near future. But first of all, Hex Orca, of course, everybody many Hexicans met you from your Hex Twitter space.
Sure.
Maybe to start with that topic, how did you come up with that? Was it just spontaneous, or are you a Twitter space expert?
Oh my gosh, no, I wouldn't have said I had any expertise, but we learned a lot along the way. So a lot of the inspiration came from initially Richard Hart had started a Twitter space probably a couple weeks back. And I was, I watch all of his live videos and I am on Twitter frequently enough that I saw him in the Twitter space and I joined, and I was surprised to see that there were a lot of people who did not have the Hex branding, right? So all three of us have Hex in our names.
Yeah.
We two have the logos, and I was scrolling through all these different profiles, and I didn't see nearly as many hexagons. I didn't see nearly as many names that had Hex or Pulse and things like that. And I was going, this seems like it's reaching a different audience.
Yeah.
And so I kind of took that energy and tried to create an atmosphere where we could invite people from outside of our echo chamber, if you will, or outside of our community, so that we would be able to have these discussions about the power of hex and pulse chain and things like that. And it took a liking to a lot of hexicans, but also to a lot of people from outside the community.
And what kind of people would you say were a lot of out of community people? I saw a lot of NFT picture people,
Yeah.
or what would you say were the majority or
Yeah.
significant parts?
I think the only real majority that I could establish would have been crypto enthusiasts. So people that are at least a little bit familiar with cryptocurrency, but you nailed it. There were a ton of people with NFT profiles, pictures, and their bio said NFT developer or NFT buyer, things like that. But for the most part, I would say the majority were just people who were very passionate about the idea of cryptocurrency. But we had people from all walks of life, man. People with interests that weren't related to finance in any way, and they just kind of stumbled across us. So a lot of diversity in that crowd.
Nice, that's very good to hear. And speaking of the pictures, I actually recently saw someone who had an actual NFT picture on Twitter in a hexagon shape.
Yeah,
And then when you clicked on it, it showed like that it's this and this NFT. Never saw that one before until recently. I mean,
yeah. I
the
guess that's the
hexagon
new thing.
would have potential for us, but of course, we're also bringing back the F into NFT. So
Yeah,
not sure about that.
yeah. No, I guess Twitter adopted the OpenSea API for NFT verification. So I'm just glad they chose a hexagon. Okay, keep us in the conversation no matter what updates you're doing, because
Yeah.
we're the future, baby.
Imagine it's like those NFT peoples with hexagons plus all hexagons with the colors.
Yeah, that'd be a sight. Huh? That's very cool.
So, Misha, you're
Nice.
saying that this feature from Twitter, which connects to the NFTs, has a octagon shape in general, yeah?
Yeah, to distinguish from a normal picture, so to speak, to indicate it's an actual NFT as a profile picture in Twitter. It's in a hexagon shape.
Cool, nice. Yeah,
Need
this
your
hexagon.
wallet. I don't know how that works, or if you want to do that, but apparently you have to connect your wallet to prove it.
Yeah,
I'm not-
Twitter is pushing hard currently in regards of crypto. They try to integrate a lot. They hiring a lot of crypto people currently. So I think there's more and more coming up in that regard. And Twitter is just the place for crypto enthusiasts, right? It's like crypto Twitter is
Absolutely.
if you want to get the sentiment of the market or news pretty quickly, because they are linked to the actual source usually. Of course, there's a lot of noise, but I think Twitter is the place to be. If it's about Hex, if it's about Bitcoin, whatever. So I'm very excited to hear more about the Twitter space, Hex Orca,
Yeah,
and how it will how it could potentially help the Hex community to even grow further, right, in the future.
of course. So I guess just to begin with that, because you nailed it, it's all about growing the community, right? Channel here, we're Hex Grassroots, and that's what it's all about. So with the Twitter space, I took it upon myself to not include any Hex or Pulse Chain or Pulse X branding in the title. And that was important to me because the space was genuinely intended to be a space for people to come in and have discussions about any topics of interest. And the importance there is that I know that you two are interested in Hex, and you guys probably have a pretty good sense that I'm interested in Hex too. So we don't have to sell each other on Hex. We're in. And I wanted to be able to reach people that would likely see value in Hex, but just don't know about it yet. And so I put out broader topics, things like crypto, finance, philosophy, autonomy, things that are important to us in the community that are a little bit larger than the idea of the asset itself. And by doing that, we found people of various interests from far outside our community, from all around the world, who, as you get to discuss with them and learn what they're interested in, a lot of times people inevitably come back and will share with you challenges that they're facing. And a lot of challenges that we face in life, are ultimately financial. And so once we would build some rapport together, have some fun, have a meaningful conversation. As these needs would arise financially, we would begin discussing the opportunities that Hex and Pulse Chain and PulseX provide. And we had phenomenal receptive feedback. People were excited to get onboarded. They had a safe environment where they had trustworthy information, where they knew that the people that were speaking to them weren't coming after their seed phrases. They were willing to explain what a seed phrase is if that's where you were starting. So it was a good environment for back and forth conversations where we could really meet people where they're at and then bring them along.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and of course, it was just the first Twitter space from you, Hex ORCA, I assume. But just to play a little bit devil's advocate here, you mentioned that you intentionally named the Twitter space not Hex, not Pulse, but crypto, blockchain, philosophy, and so on. How would you rate in hindsight, and again, just playing devil's advocate here, how would you rate the actual conversations? Was it then mostly Hex related, Pulse related, or?
You know, that's an interesting question, because over the course of 4 days we had a couple conversations, but you know, it did generally come back to Hex and Pulse Chain and Pulse X. But in the meantime, we had a lot of conversations about all sorts of broad topics. We ranged from politics to economics to relationships. There was really nothing that was off the table. And because we kept it open, you would find that even though most of the conversations didn't begin with Hex, people stuck around. There wasn't nearly as much coming in and leaving quickly, because people didn't have this sense that the conversations were not what they were interested in. We made sure to encourage them to participate, and then they realized ultimately they decide what the conversation is about. And as they stayed in and they begin to build this familiarity and this camaraderie, it became much easier to move the conversations, when appropriate, into discussions about Hex.
I
That's
see.
awesome. And at what point did you decide to go for so long and break the world record?
Oh gosh. Yeah, so I think we had been going. When I first started it, I knew I had quite a big opening on the calendar, so I didn't have an end in sight, but I definitely did not think it would go as far as it did. I think we were probably 24 hours in, and a fellow Hexican on Twitter reached out and had done the math and said, if you go for X number of hours, it'll be 5,555 minutes. And again, I kind of look at the calendar, I look at my supply of ground coffee beans, and I go, I don't think that's impossible. But one of the interesting challenges, as Richard Hart can attest to, is that those Twitter spaces are unreliable as far as a connection. So they will sometimes just end without warning. So
Yeah.
it was really kind of a miracle that we were able to make it so long without getting rug
Right.
pulled on our connection.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I have to admit that every time I requested the mic, there was just the app crashed eventually after 1 or 2 minutes. Did you
Yep.
experience similar issues?
Honestly, on my end, I did. So this was kind of spooky. My app crashed as well, maybe 4 or 5 times, but without closing the space. So I would get really nervous because the audio would stop on my end. My Twitter app would close entirely.
Yeah.
And I go, oh, you know, we got rugged. I even tweeted and had to
Right.
delete these tweets because it was wrong. I thought that we did get rugged a couple times. And then I would click a button and it says reconnect to Twitter Space. And I was like, oh, let's give it a try. And sure enough, it worked. So got
Nice.
lucky 5 or 6 times. And then eventually, after we did set the record, it had to have been within about a half hour, we got actually rugged.
All right. All right.
Okay, and that
Built
there
on a
where
hard
it
limit.
finally ended, yeah? You just got disconnected, and how does it work? Can a co-host then take it over, or?
I think typically they can, but I remember watching it. I was staring at my phone at the time, and all of a sudden, it was almost like everybody had agreed to leave one by one, and the guests fell from like 200 to like 10 in a matter of seconds. And then it said the host has ended this space, and my whole app closed. So by the time I went back in, none of the co-hosts were able to maintain it. None of the speakers were there. None of the audience was there.
Oh, okay.
I see. I
Okay.
see.
And
Yeah,
how
I
many
think
hours did you go without sleeping?
Oh gosh, I did manage to get some sleep because we had some awesome co-hosts, but I definitely did not get myself in 8 hours at any time. I was probably closer to about a 2 hour nap here, maybe a 3 hour nap there, often at like 4 in the morning my time. So luckily we had some really supportive Hexicans who managed to keep the conversations going and sort of pass off the microphone during my my inability to stay awake. So it was very
Nice, nice.
supportive.
Was there a lot of organization going on in the background? Were you like constantly
No,
texting each other?
not really, not really. It was crazy. It was like we were all on a wavelength. Um, we occasionally we DM'd each other, but for the most part, it flowed organically, and I think that was a testament to the intention of making a space where everyone is welcome to openly talk. And that's
Yeah.
what we had. We just had open discussions, and they flowed very organically, and nobody really had to be the arbiter of keeping us on topic because all the topics were available.
Mhm.
Yeah. And one thing you said earlier is you also talked a lot about philosophy, having a
Hmm.
good life, health. I think the nice thing is you get those people in, you talk about these interesting topics, you have genuine good talks, but
Hmm.
also Hex has a lot of connecting points with these topics
It
because
does.
the whole delaying gratification thing, living a good life, it
Hmm.
connects with Hex, and then you could always come back to Hex, I think.
Mm.
And honestly, that's how it worked. I don't think I ever intentionally shilled Hex, but it seemed like every time we would start talking about, like you said, healthy lifestyles, delaying gratification. I mean, heck, we have what we call the truth engine in Hex, right? And I think we agree that honesty is a valuable quality in a person. And so it seemed like no matter what we talked about, Hex was relevant. And so it kept sliding right back into the conversation.
Mm. And regarding Twitter Spaces, Orca, is it? Do I get it right that it's only accessible via your mobile phone? You
Yeah,
can't.
I guess so. I tried when I initially launched the Twitter space, I had been using an emulator on my laptop to try and make it think that my laptop was a phone so that I wouldn't have to kind of hold my device.
Right.
And I guess, and only the early attendees will be able to tell you this. If you thought my microphone was bad on Cabana, apparently my microphone was wrecked for like the first 3 hours of this Twitter space. So that, I don't know how we managed to bring anybody back if they heard the first couple of hours, because I guess it was just like
Nice,
me
man.
inside of a microwave.
Imagine next time with your new mic. You have
Yeah,
a
now
great
I've got
Twitter.
this sexy mic. We can break all the records.
Nice, awesome, awesome. Yeah, Twitter Space. What I really like about it is that, and we are all human, right? We like to
Mhm.
watch who's also listening. And when you scrolled through the participants, there were some interesting guests. You mentioned one of them during your appearance at the Happy Hour with Cabana, Jeffrey Guterman.
Mhm.
Wanted to ask you, Orca, if you tried to reach out again to him regarding like mental health interview with Maddie Allen, maybe any
Mhm.
activity on that end?
So he has seen my messages, but I think he is a little bit less into the whole like tech
Mhm.
conversations, virtual meetups and stuff. I've seen him in a couple of other Twitter spaces, so I know he's active. He's created his own Twitter space, which we
Mhm.
have kind of a funny story about. But for the most part, I don't think he was really eager to get up in front of, at times hundreds of other audience members, especially if a lot of the topics are about crypto. That might not really be his kind of bread and butter. So I did
Mhm.
try to get him lined up with Matty Allen. I haven't gotten a lot of traction there yet, but I hope he
Mm.
considers it because I think they would really benefit from talking together.
Yeah. First step is done, right? There were also other very interesting profiles. I, for example, noticed a Twitter handle called FinTwit _news. They
Yeah,
have over
yeah, FinTwit
100,000
News.
Yeah, so I just messaged them, right? If there may be
Mhm.
some interesting article to cover about Richard Hart or PulseX or something. So
Very
this
cool.
is what I really like about Twitter Space, that it's very easy to join from outside, unlike
Mhm.
at YouTube, I would say.
Mhm.
Do you see good potential for the future to grow the community? How
I
would you
think it's going to be
evaluate
one
it?
of our most powerful tools. I think
Mm,
these videos, these YouTube videos, are phenomenal, and the content is much more easily digestible for just about anybody to come in and watch and learn and listen. But the
yeah.
Twitter Spaces, while they can be a little more chaotic, right? You
Hmm.
have you have to set the tone. I think that's why we were so successful, is we set the tone of respect and kindness, and
Hmm.
those were sort of the pillars that maintained people's energy so that we wouldn't start shouting over each other or creating combative dialogue. So I
Hmm.
think if done properly, the Twitter space can reach far more people from outside of the community, and then they will always want to look for content within the community where you have more of these refined grassroots episodes, or
Right.
Richard Hart's streams and things like that.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. When you want to get deeper into the hacks or
Mhm.
community, right, you would go to YouTube. But to reach to reach new people, I think Twitter Space is a very good
And they
place.
already have a affinity to it, right? So
Mhm.
you don't start with zero, but you contact people who have an affinity, and then you try to bring them to the good stuff.
Mhm. And that was the thing, right? So we may not have had the word hex or pulse chain in the title, but when you come into the space, anyone in the audience is able to share tweets up onto the banner so that it's almost like a television screen within the space. And
Mm.
so I would share tweets that had hex.com, pulsechain.com, world's largest airdrop, pulsex.com. So even if they weren't actively coming in for the hex content, they were passively seeing a
Hmm.
lot of good
Mm.
representations of the brands.
And you, as a
It's
host, can pin a limited number of tweets up there, yeah? In
Yeah,
the
it's something like 10 tweets. I mean, it's a pretty good amount. And then they can just scroll through with their thumb to see the different content.
Mm.
So I would write a tweet while I'm in the space, depending on what the conversation was about. So when Richard Hart came in, I wrote a tweet that said, "Get to know our speaker at Richard Hart Win" on Twitter, right? And then I put the picture of him in London stepping out of the car with his cool Louis Vuitton bag, and that way you could just tap that while you're listening to him speak. It doesn't interrupt the Twitter space, and then you could go to his website and learn more about him.
mm. Cool, cool. Yeah, I didn't know that,
Awesome.
that this is possible. I saw the tweets, but I was actually wondering, like, how did
Yeah.
it come up
Yeah,
here?
it's pretty cool because it keeps the as long as you've joined the Twitter space, it will effectively let you use your phone in any other way, and it'll still play the audio of the Twitter space. So you
Hmm.
can kind of like go and look at these other tweets or open up new websites, but you won't get kicked out of the conversation.
Yeah. Switch apps even, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
Cool,
cool.
cool. All right, the Hex Orca. We got right into the topic, but
sure.
we actually also wanted to ask you a little bit. You already mentioned it during the happy hour, about about your beginnings with crypto,
Mhm.
and how you end up basically in the Hex. If you could share some insights, would be amazing.
Yeah, you bet. So I have a bit of experience in crypto, dating back to Bitcoin before it was cool. Although I think anyone that learned about Bitcoin thought it was pretty cool. But back then we didn't know as much as we know now. So I don't like to say that I was a Bitcoin maxi, but I think in my mind, I recognized Bitcoin as this opportunity to overcome centralized banking schemes.
Hmm.
And so I was in the early 2010s and was very
Wow.
passionate about crypto. And
Wow.
I had the good fortune of going to school um, away from the computer where my Bitcoin was. So for about 4 years, I couldn't touch it, which was probably the best thing that could have happened to me.
Mm.
Um, and then I remained interested in crypto. I was not super fast to Ethereum. I wasn't nearly as fast to Ethereum as I was with Bitcoin, but I don't think that when I first heard of Ethereum that it offered any of the features that we see it as today. And so I was always looking for the opportunity for people to take back control in their lives and to become their own banks, if you will, transact autonomously. That's very important to me. I definitely believe in human liberty and freedoms. So that was always a fascinating financial vehicle for me.
Nice.
Now,
And
go
sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. Sorry, so I just wanted to state that 2010 is super early. It's just like 1 year after Bitcoin launched.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
the
think I
latest
was
we ever
technically
had
like
here.
2011. Yeah, I think I was like 2011 would have been when it
Wow.
was really happening for me. So,
Still
I wanted
first
to
place,
ask
I
you.
think.
mhm.
I wanted to ask you, Orca, if back then you just like heard about Bitcoin and then you forgot about it for a couple of years, or were you actually involved in the, I don't know, Bitcoin Talk forum back then? And if you could share
See, I
how the
was
scene was
never in the
then.
forum. I was never in the forum. So I actually learned about Bitcoin through a magazine.
Wow.
So there was an advertisement for digital cash in a I'm trying to think of the name of the magazine, but it was PC something. And
Wow.
my father, who was a college professor, he also ran a side job called computer tutor, where he would go to people's houses. This is, back in like the Windows 98 days, and he would build computers and replace parts and clear viruses and stuff. So he was pretty tech savvy. So I got to grow up in a pretty tech savvy home. And I remember telling him, like, I think this Bitcoin thing could be really cool. We can mine it on our computer and stuff. And he's pretty traditional, so he wasn't interested in it, but I always kept an interest in it, luckily.
Nice. And
But yeah, it was.
the idea of digital cash was also way before Bitcoin present. Was that all something you followed, as you mentioned, also the system idea?
Yeah, so I really wasn't old enough to be able to appreciate all of it. So for me, it was really Bitcoin was my first exposure. But I had always had, I mean, all the way back being 10 years old, I always had this passion for treating people equitably. And I would look around at the jobs people were working, the money people were earning. And even back then, I felt this imbalance in terms of the value of human life and what they were receiving as compensation. And so I think that's what really made my ears perk up when I began learning about Bitcoin was it seemed like it was able to cut out the people that I felt were most responsible for sort of leveraging this imbalance against people. And I didn't know as much about digital cash, but this idea of blockchain and decentralized money really got me hooked.
Nice, awesome. Yeah, that's also how I got involved. So yeah, that's pretty exciting if you first if it makes click for the first time, right? Because the first time I heard about Bitcoin, it was also I thought mistakenly that it's some sort of PayPal, but then when I
Sure.
heard it back again, right, then it made click, and then you really dive into it deeply and read a lot of books and resources. So I can imagine it was pretty exciting for you as well, especially in 2011, 12, 13. It was
Yeah.
even more grassroots than
And
these
that's
days,
the
right?
thing is I had no one to talk to about it because I wasn't on the forums and nobody who I lived around cared about it. And I was in a rural American small town, so it didn't really matter to anybody. So I was lucky. Like I said, when I ended up going to university, and that took me away from my home for 4 or 5 years, and my computer was left untouched back in my old room at my parents' house. So that was probably the best thing that ever happened to me.
Awesome.
Because I couldn't, it's like when you stake your hex and you know you're not going to sell it. It's like I couldn't touch it, so it's just going to sit there and be held regardless.
But did you still follow throughout college the topic, the
Not
price,
as much.
etc.?
Not as much.
Okay.
Not even the price. Didn't even care.
That's so good.
I was just so like sucked into my social groups, and I was doing a triple major in my undergrad, so I was busy, and it never really crossed my mind until after I graduated. I ended up kind of gathering up some of my old things from home, and then it kind of dawned on me. It was like, oh, I should definitely check in on this.
Nice.
Orca, I wanted to ask you if you, before you left home for college, if you warned your parents to not throw away your old computer.
Didn't even think about it. It didn't even register. And that's why it was like, oh my gosh, thank goodness they didn't get rid of anything, because that would have been a nightmare if I
Yeah.
woke up one day, closer to now and said, wait a second, that hard drive's worth something. No, I got really lucky, really lucky.
Absolutely, absolutely. Can imagine that. And do you remember the time when you got more involved in crypto communities, maybe with Bitcoin, maybe with ICO Hype 217? When did you get more active, basically?
Yeah, I think probably 2017 I started to become more aware. But I also, maybe 2018, I started to use YouTube a lot more to try and learn about Bitcoin, because now I had this thing and I wanted to make sure that I was educated on it. So I had to really get brought up to speed. So I would go to YouTube and look up Bitcoin news, and I came across a video of this guy talking about Bitcoin hard forks. And in my mind, that meant like some kind of internal Bitcoin blockchain mechanism. I had no idea what a fork was. And it turned out to be Richard Hart explaining hard forks to Danny Kravitz. And that was my first introduction to Richard Hart. So I was a savage back then. I never used the subscribe feature on YouTube. So I got really lucky, because I would eventually find Richard Hart content later on as well, which was how I was able to get involved with Hex, because otherwise I probably would have just watched that video and been like, well, that's interesting. I guess people can kind of like advance the idea of Bitcoin in other ways. And then I would have just stopped. That would have been where the journey stopped for me.
Yeah.
But I was able to see more and more content from Richard. And then it was like, this guy's really smart. He's talking about some things that it seems like it makes sense.
Absolutely, absolutely. So when you met him, he was a Bitcoin maximalist back then. Was it this time?
Yeah, man. Yeah, but I mean, what else were you going to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I remember these videos as well. They were pretty good. I mean, as you mentioned, he was super smart, but also his setup, it was really good and professional with the chandelier, with the chair, with the high resolution camera. Because sometimes you see Bitcoin content back then, and they streaming from the basement. Like no offense, but subconsciously you register this stuff. So his setup was also very impressive, and plus the good information he gave, no advertise. That was pretty convincing for me.
Yep. Those are things that matter a lot to me, right? So I like to work with people that are genuine and who they don't try to set up hurdles of payments in front of you in order to get to the good stuff. Because I think if you have good information, there's sort of a social obligation to try and help educate your fellow human and help each other out. So that was kind of what I felt from him. And I think that's what kept bringing me back.
Absolutely. And it's ironic that he gets so much pushbacks and hate, right?
Oh, I know. Everyone's tough on the internet, man. It's when you see one person succeeding, 100 others try to ride their coattails, and usually the only way they can draw the eyes off of the good speaker is by being controversial.
Yeah, I mean, it's every press is good press, but particularly for Richard Hart, this accusations was really it also triggers me a little bit, because especially him, who has no links, right? You cannot even send him money if you wanted to.
Right.
There's no victim whatsoever over all the years. So that's really surprising, and I see a lot of scams listed on, I don't know, Gecko or CMC, right? So. Why not Hex?
Yeah, you would think if he was a scammer, and how good he is at video production, you'd think he'd be a little bit better at scamming you. It's like he doesn't even let you figure out how to send him money if you want to.
You can't send him money.
Yeah, it's like, good luck.
Right, exactly.
I also think that the awareness, not specifically for scams, but for these altcoin shillers is rising, like a big discussion, like a lot of people been shilling coins and then dumping, and I think they're finally getting what they deserve. Like the audience is starting to notice. You see it in the comments. They get a lot of heat back.
Everybody looks smart during a bull run. But when you start trying to shill garbage in a bear market, then you're going to get exposed pretty quickly.
Yeah, and I think you have to notice at some point they're like, it's like you could flip a coin, it would be better. Like meet Kevin's, he said, oh, okay, now is the bottom. Now you have to buy Bitcoin
my
next
gosh.
day minus 10%. So at some point you have to realize it's better to flip a coin, you know?
Yeah, Warren Buffett, the famous investor with Berkshire Hathaway, he had a really good quote, or it was his business partner, but they were giving an interview talking about how Berkshire invests and the way that they look at finance. And they said, if our predictions seem to be more correct than the competition, it's probably because we make less of them. And that's the way it works, is if you want to constantly call the tops and the bottoms, and I like to do technical analysis, I like to try and pick some highs and lows, but listen, I'm very staked. I'm very staked up in Hex, so I'm not trading it. I don't care. It's just a fun exercise to keep my brain fresh. But if you try to be the guy that calls the bottom and the top, the more often you do it, the more often you're probably going to be wrong.
Absolutely. Hex ORCA, you mentioned that you like a technical analysis. I noticed on your YouTube channel, you actually have one for everyone who doesn't know that yet. That you also did some fantastic video with this technical analysis. I wanted to ask you, do you have some like trading background or like financial background, or did it all start with Hex?
So I have a little bit of success in the legacy markets. Before investing, I worked for a transportation company fresh out of school because I wanted my resume to have some content on there. And the transportation company was responsible for what we call brokering freight, or making deals between truck drivers and manufacturers who need to ship their products. And the way that all the deals were done was by picking up the phone, calling somebody somewhere in a truck, and trying to negotiate a deal on the fly. And it was very inefficient. And what you inevitably ended up with was two men battling each other, more just to see who's the manlier man than to figure out what's a fair price. So I actually wrote an algorithm that took into account, and this is why I love Hex so much, the secret behind my pricing algorithm in freight was I denominated the ultimate value of all things in time, because that's the premium you pay when you need someone's help. How quickly do you need their help? How long can this wait, right? And so the more quickly you need someone's help, the higher the premium, and vice versa. And so a lot of people in the industry have tried to come up with a way to compute fair rates using distance, using the type of freight that they're moving. And I took all of that into consideration as well, but I incorporated time, and that created a far more successful pricing algorithm, so that we began to automate our business in ways where you didn't really have to negotiate anymore. You knew what the best price was, and it was highly agreeable on the other side, because I remember as a kid not wanting people to be exploited for their labor, would make sure that even if we weren't maximizing profits by cutting rates as low as possible, we were giving people good money. I didn't ever want to make a deal with somebody that was ripping them off. So the algorithm had to account for time, but it also had to account for the value of human effort. And that's why we were so successful. I then took that idea into the legacy markets and began writing algorithms for stocks, and being able to look at entries and exits. And then I noticed that people who would day trade typically could lose a significant proportion of their ROI just on the speed of having to click buttons. So I incorporated the technology of having the computer do it for me by setting up parameters and rules that it would analyze, and if certain criteria were met, then it would execute the trade, buy and or sell, hold different criteria. And then that led me to get pretty familiar with charts and things like that.
Wow. Nice, that's awesome. That's that's very it goes very deep. So you basically connected the merchants with truck drivers, which were self-employed, or
Yeah, a lot of them are, and some of them are company guys. So then you have to be able to recognize the difference between like what a corporation will accept as a rate versus what
Mhm.
a individual owner will accept as a rate. So you
Mhm.
might be
Okay.
able to squeeze the corporation a little bit because they have so much volume. They're doing so much business that they don't need to make all the money on one go. But
Mhm.
if you always offer that low rate to the guy who owns his own truck, pays his own insurance, pays for his own title, then he's going to feel ripped off, and rightfully so.
Right.
So we had to find the sweet spot where we were offering people good work for good money.
And how long did it take you to fully balance it out?
Uh, I wrote it in 6 months in a notebook.
Hmm.
Wow.
Nice.
And is
Nice.
it still in operation until today?
Yeah, multiple
Wow,
companies are
that's
using it today.
impressive.
Cool. Awesome.
Wow,
Really
congrats, man.
impressive.
That's crazy.
Thank you.
Now
It
we
was
know
fun.
where the knowledge about technical analysis is originating from.
Yeah, it's for me, it's just I like to solve problems, and so if you lock me in a room and give me enough time, I'll get creative. I'll figure out how to solve the problem.
Cool. Awesome. We also saw another creative, you could say, Hex project that you maybe, if please correct me if I'm wrong, started Hex University.
Yeah,
Is this an ongoing project from you?
it is. So we've got the one episode out there, the Hex T share rate episode. It's about 5 minutes, and then I just have to kind of do the same 5 minute delivery out of the video that says Hex Game Theory World Domination because it technically has the materials for episode 2. But the idea
Mhm.
behind Hex University was Hex is a beast, right? We're familiar with it, but we didn't get familiar with it overnight. And we probably
Absolutely
have a
not.
bit of passion, which helps us keep going back to the book and learning.
Yeah.
But some people, that's not going to be their immediate relationship with Hex. So I wanted to provide crucial information in easily digestible and visually stimulating presentations so that they could have a better appreciation for what's going on. So I
Mhm.
thought first and foremost, understanding the T-share rate helps you understand that unlike Bitcoin, you're
Yeah.
never too late to hex because the T-share rate is the great equalizer, and
Mhm.
it will continue to make it harder for whales to be whales. And the only way that anyone's ever going to compete long term is by recognizing the value of time.
Time. Yeah.
Which is that's
Absolutely.
why Hex is my all time favorite, and it gets into some of the inflation. So when people are concerned about the OA, hey, I had an OA in my original crypto experience. His name's Satoshi Nakamoto, and that
Mhm.
guy, he has 1 million Bitcoin, and that's not changing.
Yeah.
That proportion will always exist until that entity does decide to move those coins. So with Hex, you have an OA that's constantly being diluted because Hex inflates. So over time,
Yeah.
it becomes a smaller and smaller player, and that is beneficial to the rest of the people in the ecosystem.
Absolutely. And we have to also mention that I think many people may get this concept of a you could say a negative OA or
Hmm.
big whale because of potentially the ICO hype, right? Where we saw a lot of like non-profit organizations or like
Hmm.
founders that dumped a lot, and so it
Hmm.
stuck to your head that hey, is there like a big whale that has a lot of or a founder or I don't know, like anonymous or origin
Sure,
address that have a lot of coins? It's immediately it means it's bad, right? But it's actually the
sure.
opposite in that regard.
Hmm.
So I think many people also have to educate this in that regard and also realize that this is actually a good thing, and it's just
Yep.
and the on-chain data proves it as well.
Hmm. And guess what? Satoshi Nakamoto's coins are a good thing for Bitcoiners.
Right.
It's not going to hit your head on the market. Now, if it ever happens, sure, a nightmare. But you've made it over 10 years now, and
Mhm.
6 million X.
Yeah.
You really want to miss a 6 million X because you're too nervous to play a little bit of speculation? Have you never
Yeah.
gone to the casino and lost $20?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of
Absolutely.
interesting. I don't totally buy the arguments against an OA.
And people that get really rich, usually they would have to take a lot of risk and a lot
Hmm.
of and be very smart. Two components usually need to come together.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned the T-shirts, right, for your Hex University, and you said the difference to Bitcoin is independently of the price, you can get APY by the future staking with the smart contract, and it's only you and the computer protocols, no middleman. And
Exactly.
what I also love about it is you can relatively even out earn a whale if you stake longer. You can get more APY than him, and
Of
then
course.
relatively out earn him, and everyone that is not staked gets diluted like DOA. And
And people, we see these whales that, maybe they buy 30 million hex for 30 days or something like that, and people go, oh, they're just dumping the interest on our heads. But what you have to realize is those stakes tend to be 2,000 to 3,000 T shares, and they tend to be the largest T share stake of the day. So when they do end that stake, they ratchet the T share rate back up. So trying to do that same technique over and over and over in the long run will require staking longer and longer and longer, because there's a cap of a 10% bonus for the bigger pays better, and the cap for the longer pays better is much larger. It goes all the way up to 2x the volume. So people in the short term, I can understand being frustrated, but if you really have time as your ultimate eliminating value, you begin to see that these people are speeding up the process by which your T shares become more valuable, because they're becoming more scarce.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and when a big stake ends with like 1,000 T-shirts, if he sells, you can say, okay, at least he sold. He will never have that many T-shirts again. He lost 1,000 T-shirts. Imagine
It's
that.
beautiful.
You can say, okay, you win. If he decides to stake even longer and maybe get even more T-shirts or the same amount, he would have to stake very long. Then you can at least say, okay, I also won. This guy
Yep.
cannot sell so soon. He will be locked for 10 years or so. So either
It
way,
really
you win.
benefits both ways. It does. It's a beautiful system, and I look at where Bitcoin is at recently, and I look at the fall from 69 or 65 down to where we're at now, and all I see on Twitter are Bitcoin maxis talking about how they're never selling, how everyone needs to buy the dip. And it's like, man, how brutal is that? That you've arbitrarily chosen that you're going to hold Bitcoin for the next 5 to 10 years. But when it dips, it just dips. You don't get anything to show for it. You could have set a stop loss, had more money, bought more of your precious Bitcoin, but you didn't, because your mentality was that holding was more valuable and that you didn't want to access your capital. So what do you get in return? You get 40% reduced ROI, and you just have to wait. And that's when you start to learn how valuable your time is when you're waiting for Bitcoin to go back up.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, some of them just don't want to update their worldview, right? I mean,
it's a good way to get left behind.
You mentioned it, Orca. You've been also in that space, right? Like you were, you could say Bitcoin maximalish back then.
That's
So
a good
you
phrase.
you can get closed into this echo chamber, but yeah, some of them just don't learn. It's sad, but it is what it is. So we just try to do our best thing here.
Which is also ironic because they did a good step when they got into Bitcoin. They were very frontier like, but then they decided to stop and stand on the ground.
Yeah, imagine thinking that one technology after a decade is still going to persist for 100 years. It better be really good. And if that technology doesn't incorporate time, it probably won't stand the test of it.
I truly believe that the main reason why these guys don't like Hex in that regard is because they just ignorant or just don't do their research, and that's fine. It's their financial life, right?
Sure.
But I think if they would, for example, if you have a good personal friend who is a Bitcoin maximalist, if you will sit down with him within like for 1 hour and explain him the concept, I'm pretty sure he would turn into Hex because of the core principles that we talked about before, right? Like it's just you and the code, right? There's no middleman. It trades only on DEXs mostly. That's also very good. No middleman again.
It's my favorite.
it's immutable, 100% uptime. Like, how can you argue against that, right? It's not like
Yeah,
we want to change the world. Here's the white paper. Please invest money. It's actually the
right.
opposite. So I think most of them would actually turn into Hex, but it's just you don't know what you don't know. So
Exactly. And
Mhm.
how do you oftentimes conclude what your opinion is? You go and you understand that you can be sold on anything positive, so you
Mhm.
outwardly seek something negative. And that's how
Mm.
you end up running into FUD and things that really are not based in reality. And you don't have enough intimate knowledge of the product to be able to dispute these negative claims. So you
Yeah.
just assume that the negative claims are true. And it's like, well, you would have made a much better bet if you had just assumed the positive claims were true.
Mm.
Mostly because you could go and verify them at any time for the rest of your life. Whereas these other ones that you choose to be afraid of and take as the gospel, those are the ones that are hurting you and can be
Mm.
easily dispelled if you learned more about it. So it's unfortunate, but you
Yeah.
can't save everybody. I
Yeah.
just to get back to you, you brought up a great point, Misha, about people that got into Bitcoin were kind of frontiersmen in a way. I've looked at, so I'm pretty familiar with crypto, right? So I look at Bitcoin as this, it it has done its job. It has proven that crypto is possible.
Yep.
It was more of a thought experiment than a finished product. Ethereum has proven that decentralized finance is possible. Excellent. But they both have the underlying proof of work consensus, which is not scalable and is not efficient and serves as a negative externality on all of the
Mhm.
users of the system. So I firmly believe, with everything I've seen in the crypto space over a decade, that Pulse Chain will give us the first true environment for crypto.
Mm.
Ethereum was like a free trial. For a while, it was affordable, and we got to see how incredible some of these developments can be. But Ethereum was the free trial of crypto. Bitcoin was the white paper. Pulse Chain is the final step in showing that you can have your whole network participate in any way they choose to imagine at scale. A lot of these other companies, I know that there's blockchains that have improved the fee structure, they've improved the throughput, but they are largely not populated. They don't have
Mhm.
nearly the engagement. And some of that is because of the difficulty of the coding language that they choose to be written in. Some of it is because they simply launched empty. So it's a much less enticing project because you have to migrate into it. But what Richard's doing with the largest airdrop in history is really making it as easy as possible for people to have the full version of Ethereum without
Yeah.
having to run into the gas fees.
Orca,
Fully
are you
functioning vehicle.
Hmm.
Orca, you mentioned that you programmed a algorithm for connecting merchants and the truck drivers. I
Mhm.
imagine, I assume you're technical. I wanted to ask you if you get involved a little bit into Pulse Chain. Did you try to do something in that regard, or you just you could say investor per
I
se?
do have interests in developing some things in Pulse Chain, but they're probably a ways out. For
Mhm.
me, I feel that a lot of people get a little bit confused, in my opinion, because there's so many different quote unquote cryptocurrencies
Mhm.
that they start to believe that we like need a cryptocurrency for every imaginable use case in the world. And
Right.
I'm not sure that that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I think that crypto, like Bitcoin, the reason that Bitcoin maxis are Bitcoin maxis is because you realize that if you can get finance right, then you can fund a lot of other things that don't even necessarily need blockchain.
Mhm.
Maybe they would benefit from blockchain, um, but you just need to get finance right, and then you can do a lot of other things well. So you don't need 2,000 cryptocurrencies. You need one or two or three that do individual utilities very, very well. And the other things that we need to begin looking at are the other institutions that we operate together in the world. The financial institution is just one institution. Then we can look at applications for the other public utilities that we all access. I don't know if healthcare needs to be on a blockchain, but
Mhm.
you can start to look at ways that you might be able to improve certain aspects of the healthcare sector by using smart contracts and things like that. I think personally, I have a huge passion for freedom of speech, which eventually evolves in a democratic society into the freedom to vote. And I think that people deserve to have a more transparent, more efficient voting process. And that's something that a blockchain can provide. So maybe there's things to discuss there when you think about what your money is. Everything that you buy in a capitalistic society is essentially a vote with currency. You're supporting
Absolutely.
things with your money, right? So that's not totally different than voting with an individual ballot, and the systems are virtually the same. So maybe there's some crossover utility there that I would be interested in.
That's very interesting. I think also that Dev Kyle from Hex is also got involved. Or his initial interest in blockchain was regarding like trustless voting.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a pretty interesting concept. Are you following this concept a little bit, how it evolves, or?
It's something I'm pretty interested in.
Cool. Is there much activity, you could say, like from a different project, regardless now of Pulse Chain? Is there something viable going on, or
nothing that I would draw any eyes to at this point? I think that's what I mean when I say that Pulse Chain is really our first opportunity for crypto, because we're going to have an environment that actually has a large user base and is inviting to many, many more users as it goes, and it is sustainable. So now we can begin having these broader conversations about the utilities of things that maybe aren't money. We can do money really well. I don't need 2,000 currencies to do money well. The Federal Reserve doesn't need 2,000 currencies to do money well. It denominates everything in dollars. So I don't need Zimbabwe's currency and Chile's currency. They are all locally viable, but they're all ultimately denominated by the US dollar.
Yeah, and I can only imagine we need first to accumulate a lot of acceptance and adoption, because the walls, if changing a voting system or anything governmental, I think the burdens are quite huge, and big acceptance would definitely help. And still, then it would be a very hard process, I can only imagine.
And I think that's why in blockchain you see the opposite of what we've seen in centralized banking societies. Rather than beginning with the vote and then working towards the dollar, you begin with the money, and then you can begin working towards those other institutions, because the money simulates much of the effort, like we said, of voting, but it also inspires usership, because people like to buy things. They like to own things. They like to have that freedom. And so that's how you can attract the most people, is by offering them an environment where they get to have a say in the way their life changes at the individual level. Voting is a group activity, but transacting can be a very individual activity. So you start there and work your way up.
I see. Maybe to play, or maybe just let's take one more question from the Hex chat. Hexover asks if you plan to become a Pulse Chain validator, in case you can reveal that.
I will withhold that for now. I think that there's a lot of people that we can support as validators. I don't think that I currently have a huge interest in doing it, mostly because I have some plans that would require my location to be pretty variable upcoming. So I would feel I wouldn't feel as good for the community knowing that I wouldn't always be available if attention was needed.
Fair enough. Coming back to the Hex University, Hex ORCA, you mentioned it's an ongoing project. A couple of videos are already online. Where do you see this going? Do you plan to allocate a little bit more time into that structure, or is it more like whenever you have time?
What
can we expect?
I think 2022 will see a lot more of that content coming out, because I'd like to address essentially each of the major pillars of the quote-unquote Hex white paper that Dev Kyle had put out. And so that's where I think if we have visual educational materials for the core content of what makes the Hex smart contract work, and then we can get to Pulse Chain and Pulse X. But I think we start with Hex because it's important. Then
And
people can really get their hands around it.
it will be based slowly on YouTube videos, yeah? Educational programs through YouTube playlists.
I think so. I always write up. So for the people at howtopulse.com, I also write up a transcript in case people would prefer to read it. So I try to create content that wouldn't require visual engagement. I think people, it's nice to have multiple stimuli when you're learning. So I give them the
Absolutely.
visuals, I give them a script that's digestible, and then if you would prefer to read it, that can be an option as well. And so I try to condense that information into a small enough presentation where you might have to watch it 2 or 3 times, but it's not going to come with any external noise. And I think that the kind of encapsulated little YouTube videos might be the most efficient way so far.
And are they lectures? And if so, how long are they? Or
Yeah, they're sort of like lectures. I try when I make an actual Hex University video, I try to make it 5 minutes or less. I feel like that's
I
probably
see.
about as much attention span as I can beg for anyone to give us. And then I would like once there are several episodes published, I would like to kind of do a live stream regarding those episodes so that people can ask questions, because I think no matter how well I think I've explained it, we all interpret information differently, and sometimes we
Yeah.
get hung up on things. So I would like to be able to address people's questions live so that we can kind of, work it out in the classroom together, if you will.
Nice. Like an Ask Me Anything session, yeah?
Exactly.
Cool. Awesome.
Awesome.
And in regards of the Twitter Spaces, I can imagine you have a lot of support from the Hex, at least from the Hex and Pulse Chain community. Are
Oh
you
yeah,
planning to do more spaces in the future?
definitely. A lot of
Nice.
support. Huge shout out to the Hexagon community, the Pulse Chain community, Pulse X. You guys have been phenomenal and very supportive and very fun to get to know and talk to. And also the people that were not a part of our community who have now joined. It was really fun to get to kind of live that experience with them. So I definitely see it as a tool that will be used so that we can continue to engage a much larger audience than just the ones that we're all familiar with already. Because I think that's I'm trying to get better at, man. Sometimes I bash the Bitcoin maxis on Twitter a little bit. I got to get better at this. Got to be a little more inviting to everybody, because I do
Yeah.
believe that even though we all have our preferred cryptos, the most important thing is that we remember why we have crypto, because in that breath, we are all much more similar than we are different. So while we have different projects and different preferences, what's important is that the crypto movement maintain solidarity within itself, because it's only through mass acceptance and cooperation that we're going to be able to change the world in the ways that we hope to do.
Beautiful set.
Awesome. Maybe one last question, Orca.
Sure.
There was recently this topic with the Daytona car. They want to color a
Yeah.
racing car in the Hex colors. I'm a little bit out of loop. I don't know exactly what's going on there. Can you give us a summary?
Sure. So a couple of Hexicans had an opportunity to speak with a NASCAR team marketing official. So Agape Hex and Motley Investor were able to have these discussions, and ultimately the team for the driver's name is JJ Yeeley, Yeley. He's been driving for over a decade. He's a very skilled, very experienced driver. They are approaching the Daytona 500, which will be, I won't get the date 100% right, but I want to say like February 25th. It's a Sunday. But if you go to my Twitter, you'll be able to pull it up. I tweeted about it a lot. I guess 27th, it looks like, would be that Sunday. And so that's the driver right there, JJ Geely. And we have an opportunity through this fundraising effort that a couple of Hexicans have put together to get the entire car branded in hex.com branding, the color schemes, the URL, the hexagon, their entire team outfit. So you see he's wearing kind of a blue outfit
okay.
there. He would get to wear an entire Hex branded
Wow.
outfit. The whole pit crew that changes the tires and fuels the car would be wearing Hex logos. And then the person up in the kind of the top sky watch where they watch the racers from up in a tall tower would also be branded. So
They will never look better.
yeah, I know it would be a really cool color scheme, and I'm not one to beg people for donations. The way I look at it is we have a really big community. Anyone that has an interest in NASCAR or who is looking for an opportunity to help get Hex out there, this is a cool way to do it, I think. So it's
And
a
this
big
will be for
community.
one race?
It'll be for one race, but it'll be for the biggest race. It's called the Daytona
Oh.
500, and it's
Okay.
estimated to have 10 million viewers. So they do days of coverage leading up to the race and days of coverage after the race. And then the drivers
Nice.
themselves after the race have, and before the race even, have interviews with all sorts of media outlets. They're always wearing the branded uniform and things like that. So
Nice.
a lot of
Yeah,
exposure.
that's pretty awesome. And also a different territory, right?
Yeah, so it's
Getting out there.
there's been a couple of cars that have been sponsored by crypto efforts in the past. Dogecoin had a car. I can't recall the other racer off the top of my head, but so it's not unheard of. It's not like we would be taking this risk of being the first ever crypto on a NASCAR, but it is kind of an interesting proposition because this is an environment that most people would be surprised when they learn how much money floats around the deep south with NASCAR and some of these brands. There's billionaires in NASCAR. Michael Jordan owns a NASCAR team. There's a lot of money out there, and then there's also your ordinary person like us who has an interest in fighting that good fight and obtaining your financial freedom and all of that. So that's kind of who the general audience is. So you kind of get a good cross section of
Nice.
different interested parties.
Good target group, yeah, for Hex and its
I think so.
core values.
I think so. And I don't want anyone to feel like they have to donate, but it's just an opportunity, right? It's we would never have known that we could break the Twitter world record for spaces if we didn't try. So
Right.
there's not a lot of harm in trying. And I say this to help other people because y'all can appreciate this because you put out good content and you know what it takes to be consistent and to keep coming back and doing it. But when I first started that Twitter space, that tweet, the initial tweet to invite people in, still to this day has 0 likes and 0 retweets.
Oh, wow.
So the thank you message had hundreds of retweets and over 1,000 likes, and nobody supported the first tweet.
Yeah,
So
Amazing.
it starts somewhere, right? And it starts with our individual effort.
Yeah, Orca, this is like this virality video of this during the festival when one guy was dancing on the hill. Did you see it? And then everybody joined him and joined the trend. This reminded me of that. So yeah, well
I'm
done.
always the first one on the dance floor, baby. And I feel that way in real life. My granny passed away last summer, and in her commemoration, she wanted us to remember, because it was important to her. She loved dancing. She said that no matter where you go in life, I hope that you'll dance. I hope that you'll embrace the opportunity to dance whenever you can. And I see it every time I go out to the club, or if I'm at a wedding, or if I'm at a little family get together. Everybody wants to have fun, but someone's got to break the ice, right? So don't be afraid to take that first step, because you will be shocked at how many people are just waiting for you to do something so that they can become a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have a lot of talented dancers in the community. Richard Hart, Kareem. I can imagine
man.
Orca.
Oh man, I'll shake it down with the best of them. I loved seeing the footage of Richard dancing, because it's like that's a very human thing. You can't fake dancing.
Awesome. I enjoy it as well. So yeah, I hope we get the chance to party together one day.
You bet. I hear y'all can party pretty hard over there. So we'll have to have a little meeting of the nations and get our party on.
Absolutely. Orca, one last question.
Sure.
Matrix 4, please comment on that. You enjoyed it? You hated it?
Matrix 4, I watched it a couple of times because I loved the first Matrix, and the other two were pretty good.
Yeah.
Matrix 4 was okay. A lot of people hated it, but it's just different. I think they only had one of the Wachowski siblings doing the directing, so they probably didn't have all of the artistic creativity they ought to have had. But I thought that it still did a good job. If you strip away some of the disappointing combat or some of the disappointing visuals at times, it still did speak to the essence of the Matrix, which is all about sort of this opportunity for humans to take back their own lives and take back their freedom. But then what do you do? We all have this. I talk to people all the time, especially in investing, and everybody's chasing unlimited money. And then I ask them, what will you do when you get it? And there's very few people that have an answer ready for that. And so the Matrix, I think the Matrix 4 kind of showed us, you're trying to break out of the Matrix. Okay, well then what? Now it's on you. Now you have to create society. And what does that society look like? Are these people going to be better off living in a world that has no sun and has very limited opportunities for work and for food? Are they better off in the Matrix in a simulation if you can improve the simulation? And so there's a lot of questions that need to be asked about what would you do if you had all the power and all the money and all the time? What does that world look like?
Nice, very nice answer. Thank you for that. Yeah, the Matrix, how you call it? Not trilogy, but
yeah, I guess now I just call it like a series.
A series or quartet. Yeah, it's pretty amazing quartet. I really enjoy these movies as well. And yeah, Matrix 1 is my favorite movie. I would state. So we're on the same page here for sure.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah,
Awesome.
I probably watched that about 1,000 times, man. I could probably speak everyone's lines as the movie plays.
Yeah, it's a classic. Every time I'm thrilled to watch it, and
it's so good.
Absolutely. Cool. Yeah, we are more than 1 hour in, HEX ORCA. I think we will wrap up here.
Sure.
Thank you again for taking the time to speak to us, to share your knowledge with us, your story, and also what we can expect or see. No expectations, but what you will do in the future with HEX University. So yeah, we are pretty excited to follow you.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you guys inviting me. It was a ton of fun to get to talk to you, Misha and Meister, and
it was awesome. Honestly,
it's not something I ever thought I'd be doing, really, because I like to I operate in a silo usually, but I'm really enjoying getting to share these times with Hexicans. You guys are really cool, and you're so welcoming. So thank you for having me on.
Nice. It was nice talking to you, and good content, I think. Thank you so much. Roughly enjoyed it.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. I'll be sure, if I'm not subscribed yet, I'll be sure to subscribe. I told you I almost didn't subscribe to Richard Hart back in the day. I'm bad at this stuff. Gotta get better at hitting the bell, man. So anyone that's listening, you're probably subscribed because you're smarter than me, but make sure you're hitting the like button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. Turn on all the notifications. You never know when you might miss the next Hex that's coming out,
Analytics on the channel says 40% of viewers are unsubscribed. So guys, you know what to do.
Oh my gosh. We can
unacceptable numbers.
Those are rookie numbers in this racket.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you one more time, HEX ORCA, for your time. And we will see you in your Twitter space. Once it's up, you can expect us there.
Very cool. Very cool. Can't wait to have you guys in there, and we can have some more fun conversations.
Cool.
All right.
See you there.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Take care, y'all.
That was lovely. And Meister, can you give us a summary, please, of this awesome talk?
Yeah, HEX ORCA. Funny fact: HEX ORCA is not a whale, but technically a dolphin. But it's the largest member of this family. So,
and he kills whales. Yeah.
Sometimes he attacks whales, so be careful out there, even if it's only in quote dolphin. HEX ORCA been around in cryptocurrency for a long time already, got involved in Bitcoin, has been following the space. He's also technical, as he developed some nice business, some nice program for freight, connecting drivers and merchants. So I think he also has a very good technical understanding, and he praised, of course, the Hex code and the upcoming pulse chain code. He's a typical Hex Grassroots, you could say, standing up for the little man. He really supports fairness, that everybody gets the same shot. That's why I can imagine he's also so much into Hex. And yeah, he's the host of the record holding Twitter space, and we can expect more from him there. So please make sure to follow Hex Orca on Twitter and keep an eye open for his upcoming Twitter spaces. Also on YouTube, he has an own YouTube channel called Hex Orca, where he tries to break down the complexity of the Hex ecosystem, of the Hex system, like T-shares, where he tries to educate new people about the system to make it easier for them to get onboarded. So also make sure, if you have not done it yet, to subscribe to his YouTube channel. And yeah, pretty excited
Thank you,
to follow him.
Meister. Thank you, Meister. Guys, thank you for tuning in. This was Hex Grassroots number 15 with Hex Orca. Goodbye and good night from Berlin.